In a world where time bends and reality shifts with every heartbeat, two souls are caught in a rhythm only they can hear. Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo, two parallel hearts beating on opposite sides of fate. It began on a rainy night in Shanghai. The city glimmered like liquid glass, the streets awash with reflections of neon dreams. Xiao Zhan stood under a flickering streetlight, holding an umbrella that seemed too small to shield him from the storm outside, or the one inside. He was late as usual, and though he didn't know it yet, destiny had been waiting for this precise delay. A motorcycle engine roared through the rain, slicing the night with thunder. Wang Yibo, helmet on, confidence glowing like electric fire, skidded to a stop right in front of him. The tires sprayed water, and their eyes met through the rain. It wasn't just a glance. It was an echo, like two chords played in perfect harmony across dimensions. Need a ride? Yibo's voice was steady, teasing, but beneath it was something neither could name: familiarity. Without thinking, Xiao Zhan nodded. The moment he climbed onto the bike, time hiccuped. The lights stretched, the rain slowed, and for a split second, they both saw it. Another world flickering over this one. The same street but quieter, older. A lantern-lit alley. And in that mirrored reality, they weren't strangers. They were something more. When the vision vanished, they both froze. What was that? Xiao Zhan whispered. I should be asking you, Yibo said, but his grip on the handlebars tightened. They didn't speak of it again that night, but the moment lingered, like the last note of a haunting song that refused to fade. The next morning, Xiao Zhan found an old notebook in his studio. He didn't remember buying it, but it was there, leather-bound, slightly burnt at the edges, and filled with sketches of him and Wang Yibo in ancient robes, side by side under cherry blossoms. On the last page, in faded ink, were 5 words that sent chills through his veins. Find him before time resets. Meanwhile, Yibo couldn't shake off the sense of déjà vu. Every sound, every color, every heartbeat seemed to remind him of something long lost. He was a dancer in this life, but in his dreams, he fought with swords under crimson skies. And every time a voice called his name, soft, desperate, and achingly familiar. Then came the night of the eclipse. They met again by accident or maybe not. Xiao Zhan was performing at a charity art exhibition. His latest collection titled Parallel Hearts. Yibo, there for a motorbike brand sponsorship, wandered into the gallery by mistake. And there it was again, the pull, the quiet hum between them that the air itself seemed to respond to. They stopped before a painting, 2 figures standing on a bridge, one holding a sword, the other a brush. Above them the moon split in 2. This, Yibo whispered, feels like a memory. Xiao Zhan turned, his eyes reflecting the broken moon in the painting. Maybe it is. As the lights flickered, they both reached for the frame, and the world fractured. Suddenly they were no longer in the gallery. They stood in an ancient courtyard drenched in moonlight. The air smelled of plum blossoms and fire. Their clothes had changed. Xiao Zhan wore the robes of a scholar, Yibo the armor of a warrior. It wasn't a dream. It was a return. In that world, they were bound by fate but separated by duty. Xiao Zhan, a royal scribe, had once risked his life to protect forbidden knowledge, a prophecy that spoke of 2 hearts destined to meet across lifetimes. Yibo, the general sworn to guard the kingdom, had been tasked to destroy it. But he couldn't. Instead, he protected Xiao Zhan, and paid for it with his life. Now, in this collapsing echo of time, the truth unfolded between them like fire and silk. You died for me, Xiao Zhan said, voice breaking. Yibo stepped closer, his hand trembling. And I would again. But this time maybe we can change it. The sky shuddered. The eclipse from the gallery appeared above them, spinning like a broken clock. The edges of the world began to fade, threads of memory unraveling. Xiao Zhan reached for him. If time resets, we'll forget everything. Then I'll find you again, Yibo said softly. In every life. In every world. Their hands met, and the courtyard burst into light. When they opened their eyes, they were back in the gallery. The painting was gone. So were the guests. Only the faint sound of a heartbeat echoed through the empty hall. Did that just happen? Xiao Zhan whispered. Yibo smiled faintly. You tell me, artist. And then he saw it. On Xiao Zhan's wrist, a small scar that hadn't been there before. The shape of a half-moon. The same mark he'd seen on the scholar's wrist centuries ago. The connection was real. From that night on, strange things began happening. Whenever they were close, lights flickered, clocks stopped, and echoes of another life would bleed into the present. Whispers, flashes, forgotten laughter. Once, during a rehearsal, Xiao Zhan was sketching on a backstage wall. Without realizing it, he had drawn a map. A city layout from another era, ancient and impossible. Yibo walked in, saw it and froze. I've been there, he said quietly. So have I. They both stared at the map, feeling something awaken. Not in their minds, but in their souls. Days turned into weeks, and they began uncovering more signs. The painting that vanished reappeared in a museum in Kyoto. An old sword from a forgotten dynasty bore the same moon mark, and every time they touched, the world seemed to pulse as if recognizing them. But fate, ever cruel, had one more twist. A mysterious curator approached them with a chilling message. The parallel cycle, she said, is closing. You two were never meant to meet again. But you did, and that will cost you time itself. What do you mean? Xiao Zhan asked. The universe will correct its course. You'll be torn apart until the cycle ends. The words hit like thunder. But Yibo, with his usual quiet defiance, simply smiled. Then we'll fight time. The curator's warning proved true. Days later, everything began to unravel. Clocks running backward, mirrors reflecting other realities, memories flickering in and out. They'd wake up in different timelines. One in modern Shanghai, the other in the ancient world, calling out across centuries that bent and twisted to keep them apart. But their hearts never forgot. One night, when the sky split open once more, half-moon glowing over two worlds, Xiao Zhan found himself on the bridge from the painting. Wind howled. The world trembled. And through the rift of time, he saw Yibo walking toward him. The warrior's armor cracked but his eyes steady, unyielding. End it! Yibo shouted over the chaos. If we destroy the bridge, the cycle resets. But we'll meet again clean in the next world. No, Xiao Zhan cried. I can't lose you again. Yibo smiled, tears glinting like stars. You won't. Parallel hearts always find their rhythm. And then, with one final step, he touched Xiao Zhan's hand, and the bridge shattered into light. The explosion of time erased everything. But in another world, in a quiet cafe where rain kissed the windows, Xiao Zhan sat sketching absent-mindedly. A stranger walked in. Leather jacket, faint smirk, familiar energy. Is this seat taken? Bo asked. Xiao Zhan looked up, eyes widening. For a heartbeat, time stopped again. No, he whispered, smiling softly. It never was. The rain had stopped, but the city still shimmered like it was made of secrets. Xiao Zhan stood beneath the dim glow of the streetlight, droplets sliding from his hair, eyes lost in the reflection of a world that didn't quite feel like his own. It was past midnight, and the quiet hum of Shanghai's sleepless heart beat around him. Taxis whispering past, neon signs flickering like nervous stars, and somewhere in the distance, a faint melody of a violin playing in the rain. That's when it happened again. That strange pulse beneath his ribs, as though someone somewhere shared his heartbeat. He had felt it once before. That night with the motorcycle and the man whose eyes seemed to burn straight through the storm. Yibo. Ever since that brief encounter, nothing had felt normal. Every mirror seemed to show a flash of another world. Every dream left behind fragments of memories that weren't his. And tonight that pulse was stronger. Suddenly, he heard the familiar growl of an engine, that low, thrilling rumble that sent his nerves into chaos. He turned, and there it was. The same black bike slicing through the fog, headlights glowing like twin moons. Yibo stopped just inches away, removing his helmet. His damp hair falling over sharp eyes that carried too many untold stories. Still standing in the rain, Yibo said, his voice deep, teasing, but with that quiet warmth that made the air feel electric. Xiao Zhan managed a small smile. You always find me when it rains. Maybe that's when your world leaks into mine, Yibo replied, half joking, but the look in his eyes said otherwise. They didn't move for a moment, two figures caught in the hush before a storm that wasn't weather but memory. Then Yibo gestured toward the bike. Get on. The words felt familiar, like a line from an old story. And though Xiao Zhan didn't know why, his chest tightened with something like déjà vu, a whisper that told him this was where it always began. As he climbed onto the bike, his hand brushed Yibo's shoulder. The world tilted. The city lights fractured into shards of silver and blue, bending into spirals. The rain froze midair. For a heartbeat, the street was gone, replaced by a moonlit bridge, its reflection stretching into infinity. He saw two figures standing there, one holding a sword, one holding a brush, and he realized they weren't strangers. They were them. The vision vanished as the bike sped forward, the city reassembling around them. Xiao Zhan's pulse raced, but not from the wind. Did you see that? He shouted. Yibo didn't answer. His grip on the handlebars had tightened, his jaw clenched. Later, when they stopped by the riverside, Yibo leaned against the railing, watching the water ripple like liquid glass. You felt it too, didn't you? Xiao Zhan nodded. It was like, we've been here before. Not in this city, not in this time, but somewhere else. Yibo turned to him, eyes shadowed. What if we have? The air between them stilled, heavy with an invisible weight, something ancient and tender that neither of them understood. That's when a light flickered in the corner of Xiao Zhan's vision, a reflection on the water, faint but unmistakable. The moon above them shimmered, and for a brief second, it split into two perfect halves. Parallel moons, parallel worlds, parallel hearts. Xiao Zhan blinked, and the river shimmered again, this time revealing faint silhouettes beneath the surface, flashes of another life. He saw himself kneeling over a wounded warrior, Yibo, their hands clasped, their blood mixing under a blood-red sky. He gasped and stumbled backward. Zhan! Yibo caught him, steadying him with a hand on his arm. What did you see? I think, he whispered, we've met before. And one of us died. Yibo froze. The wind howled softly through the trees. Then maybe this is our second chance. They stared at each other, not as strangers anymore, but as souls that had waited too long to find their rhythm again. The next day, Xiao Zhan couldn't focus. His art studio was filled with sketches he didn't remember drawing, portraits of Yibo in ancient armor, landscapes of a world that had never existed. On one canvas, half finished, he'd painted that same bridge from the vision, with two figures standing apart but reaching for each other. That's when he noticed something on the back of the painting, faint words etched into the wooden frame. Find him before time resets. He froze. The handwriting looked like his own, yet older, wiser, more desperate. That night, unable to ignore it any longer, Xiao Zhan went back to the riverside. The city was quieter this time. No bikes, no thunder, just the soft breath of wind brushing through the night. He thought he was alone until he heard it, the sound of footsteps. Yibo appeared from the shadows, holding something wrapped in cloth. I found this today, he said, unfolding it to reveal an old pendant shaped like a crescent moon, the exact design from Xiao Zhan's sketches. It was buried under my studio floor, Yibo said quietly. Like it's been waiting. Xiao Zhan reached out and touched it. The metal burned against his skin, not painfully, but with recognition. And then the air trembled. The moonlight brightened, swallowing the riverside in silver. The world around them began to dissolve again, trees melting into mist, stars spiraling into the water. They were being pulled back. When the light cleared, they were standing once again on that same bridge from their visions, the ancient one, lit by lanterns and moonfire. But this time it wasn't a glimpse. It was real. Xiao Zhan looked down at himself, dressed in scholar's robes, ink-stained hands clutching a brush. Yibo beside him wore dark armor, a sword strapped to his back. The air was thick with memory. "This is where it ended last time," Xiao Zhan said softly. Yibo nodded. "Then maybe it's where it begins again." They stood there, the silence between them charged with something eternal. Then Yibo reached out, fingers brushing Xiao Zhan's cheek. "I couldn't save you before," he whispered. "But maybe now I can save us." And just like that, the world began to tremble. The bridge cracked beneath their feet, glowing with a strange golden light. Time was fighting back, trying to separate them once more. Xiao Zhan grabbed Yibo's hand. "Don't let go." "I never did," Yibo said, smiling through the chaos. The bridge shattered, and once again light consumed everything. But this time, when Xiao Zhan opened his eyes, he wasn't alone. They were back in the city, standing under the same streetlight where it all began, still holding hands. The rain had returned, but now it felt different. Softer, almost welcoming. Yibo looked at him, breathless, eyes full of quiet wonder. "Maybe this is it. The world where we finally get to live it right." Xiao Zhan smiled faintly. "Or maybe it's just the next beginning." They stood there in the rain, the hum of the city fading into silence. Two souls bound by something deeper than time itself. Parallel hearts, finally in rhythm. Because sometimes love doesn't need forever. It just needs one heartbeat that refuses to forget. Sparkles, if you enjoyed this continuation of Parallel Hearts, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more enchanting Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo stories to life. Tales of destiny, love, and hearts that never stop finding their way back to each other. Red Heart.